This past weekend, I was actually in Las Vegas at the No False Solutions gathering with the No False Solutions Coalition, which is mainly led by Pueblo Action Alliance. This is their third year having it. They actually canceled this one because they were going to have it. I think like a week after everything that had happened back in October. So, oh no, they were supposed to have it a week after the shooting. The shooting in
Oh,
Espanola happened, and then
yes.
10 days later, everything in Gaza started happening. And so, yeah, just crazy time to think back on. But anyways, so they postponed it until now, and so I had the honor of going and really just catching up on all of the work. I would see, them post little things here and there, but they definitely laid out a timeline of everything that had happened. And I was just like, oh my God, like seeing it laid out like that just makes me realize like how how I had overlooked it during this time, understandably. But um PAA and the No False Solutions Coalition was successful in repealing hydrogen hubs from coming to New Mexico at
That's
all.
major.
Major. And I'm just so grateful for their work and their just relentless um opposition when it comes to going to the state legislature. We don't really Red Nation doesn't really participate in the whole legislative stuff, but I am just so grateful for the organizations that do and who are doing that work in the background. And these developments are happening, and I'm just really proud of them. IEN was also there. Indigenous Climate Action was also there. Yucca was there, and there's a bunch of other organizations who do the environmental stuff here. And I went with Patuch, who's been on their podcast, and I love hanging out with him. I'm like,
What a
oh,
legend.
yes, legendary elder, but he just does like cool elder things too. Like we went to go eat at El Potter Soul, and the if you've been at El Potter Soul, you know how like their salsa is. It is hot. It is hot, hot salsa. He carried a container around for like the next 6 meals. I was like, that is amazing. Like
Like pro tips.
I just haven't hung out with an elder like that in a long time, I feel like. It was
Oh,
good.
that's
It was
awesome.
good. It was. And he's been involved in the anti-nuclear work in New Mexico for a really long time, but and so we have those conversations, and he introduced me to some people. I got introduced to the director of Nuclear Savage, which Nuclear Savage was the first Red Nation event shown. And I'm like, you don't even understand your place in
It
Red
was.
Nation history.
It was the
Like,
very first event Red Nation ever hosted was a film
and
screening of Nuclear Savage at
And that was
UNM.
also the event that Jen attended that was the first event she attended for Red Nation. And that's what radicalized her into getting into Red Nation at all. I was like, you don't understand the like stake you have in our like organizational history, and you just like Pueblo history even. I was like, yeah, just an amazing weekend. But yeah, just thinking about those things, thinking about what we didn't take the time to think about in the moment as these things were happening. And it was just a really great space to look back and really acknowledge these victories.
Heck yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about what No False Solutions is? What is this coalition and what's their mission and the goal?
Oh, sorry. Siri, not you.
Shut up, Siri.
Yeah, I'm trying to turn off my device. It's making sounds, and I don't know how to mute it. Oh God. Anyway, um, so No False Solutions, they began organizing around carbon. They were organizing. They started going to all the COP conferences, and they I know that they went to Glasgow. I think that was the same year that D had went also. But yeah, and they kind of talk about how these different COP conferences happen.
2021. That was when it was in Glasgow.
Yeah. And I think they all started going around the same time. And so they kind of debrief about what's being said there. And I'm still unclear about what the COP conference actually is, but what I can gather is it's basically a market for energy and these like new energies that they're trying to promote. So the big thing a couple years ago was getting carbon down to net zero, which is like the most insidious thing that they do. Like at the No Fall Solutions conferences, they end up mainly talking about how these, settler institutions are like purposely using their language to mix up your mind into thinking that they're doing something cool when really they're just doing something like really insidious. So
Yeah, the net zero movement is disgusting.
disgusting. Basically, they make it so that these energy companies who are have tons of carbon emissions, they can buy like farmland or forest land from like people like tribes, and they can offset their carbon usage by saying that, well, we have this much forest land that is producing enough oxygen to cover for how much carbon emissions that we're producing. So they just end up creating more carbon. And then there's this other thing where they can buy carbon from other industries or other, yeah. And so like, if there's two smoke-in columns and they're producing the same amount of emissions, the one of the columns can buy up all the emissions of the other one, and from other countries and from other places, and it just ends up in a really gross cycle. And then of course, like in recent more recent times, they're trying to promote nuclear energy as clean energy.
Oh, so insidious.
Yeah, and then I guess even more recently, hydrogen is like the big like push for toward energy. And hydrogen, from what I understand, I'm still kind of unclear about the actual process, but what I do know is it takes up tons and tons of water. And then there's this whole thing about trying to get produced water to be used for hydrogen energy. And yeah, it's just dirty energy still.
So we're oh, God, capitalism is so grotesque. Like it's literally like Frankenstein. Everything you're just describing, it's like capitalism doesn't want to stop. And so it's just like piecing together these like grotesque body parts and calling it like energy transition, right? And I'm at a loss for words because it's just really hard to describe how, again, like just how disgusting the landscape looks. And I think this is what happens at COP. I think at COP, all of like the fancy countries, all of the imperial kind of capitalist countries and corporations, they wine and dine together and they strike these bargains and these deals, and they create these frameworks like net zero and cap and trade, um, to maintain their profits, but to like give the facade or like the appearance that they're engaged in like a a transition to renewable energy sources. Meanwhile, right, like you don't actually have to change. You don't have to reduce anything. None of them are actually reducing emissions at all. Like the primary producers of carbon emissions are not having to reduce any of their emissions, but they're just like, okay, for every like, I don't even know if it's quantified. I bet you they've hired scientists to quantify how much like planting a tree will offset a certain. I'm not actually sure how carbon emissions are measured, like the scientific measurement.